Welcome everyone to ISKCON of Silicon Valley. This is also known as the Hare Krishna movement. If you came to the wrong place, please stay anyway. We do feed everyone later. Our founder, who is seated upon this ornate seat, which is called the Vyasasana, is a representative of a line of teachers who present what is called reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. It's presented in one of the main teachings called the Srimad Bhagavatam in a very straightforward way that everything emanates from one original divine source, and we're all part of that. And our main interest in life as humans is to reconnect and realign, or maybe I should say realign and reconnect, or one may be sufficient, with our source. What's unusual about the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is an explanation of the ancient wisdom literatures called the Vedas, is that it presents our original source as personal. And of course, logically, that makes sense because each one of us has a personal origin as well. And if you don't, and you're an AI robot, you can also stay and record the class. If you ask who your father's father was, and you keep going back all the way, you'll find that there's a continuous chain. You're looking at your family tree. There's a personal origin. So the Srimad Bhagavatam says similarly, there's a personal origin to us and to everything else and to all the energies in the world. What's more, in the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the main texts that we follow, the teacher, Krishna, says that this world is a very personal type of world in that it's responsive to everything we do. That's what sometimes people talk about as karma. In fact, if you interview people randomly downtown San Jose, take a clipboard with you so you look official, and ask them if they've heard of karma. Most people will say what? And will say, what does it mean to you? What will they say? What goes around comes around. That's 97.2% people answer that. That's unsupported, the number I gave, but it's fairly close. What goes around comes around means there's some order to the world. And if there wasn't, then there'd be no point in us sitting here and having a class. Because if everything's random, then there's no sense in trying to understand it in the first place. But this kind of thinking dates back thousands of years in the idea of logos. When we talk about science, oftentimes we put the suffix ology. Ology comes from the word logos, which directly indicates that the universe has order and purpose. If it doesn't have some order, at least, forget the purpose for now, then you wouldn't be able to study it, because modern science is based on the controlled experiment. If nothing to control, there's nothing to study. The material nature lends itself fairly well to the controlled experiment, although there are caveats in that even observing this world is a little difficult. For instance, there's what is called the observer effect, and that is as soon as you begin to look at the world, it changes right before your eyes. So, the study of what's beyond matter, the metaphysical, is the overarching goal of the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam. And someone may say, well, what is that that's beyond matter? Well, just to give it a name, we could call it metaphysical. Meta means above or beyond, so metaphysical means that which is beyond the physical. And one may think that sounds untenable, because how could you measure something or even observe something beyond the physical? And of course, this is one opinion that many scientific communities hold, or at least a few, and that is there's nothing to see beyond matter. However, we can also understand, just by common sense, the metaphysical in observing how we react to the world. For instance, we do have a sense of justice, don't we? Please say yes. And that if we see an injustice, we may protest. For instance, if somebody treated someone who's weaker than them in a harsh way, or let's just say we don't condone violence for its own sake. And if we see violence, gratuitous violence, then we may have a sense that justice needs to be done, some due process. But where does that sense come from? Because if we are only material entities and we're only dealing with matter, then where does that sense arise from? That it's unjust to treat other living beings cruelly. And that is harder to measure. Matter's not so easy to measure, although we do the best we can. But when we come to metaphysics, how will you measure justice? Of course, we try to do that, for instance, in the legal system, don't we? Because when you bring someone for trial, you're mainly trying to understand what their intention was. Now, you can't go to Home Depot. I mean, you can go to Home Depot. I wouldn't go necessarily. No customer service. Uh-oh, hope we don't get sued for that. If you go to Ace Hardware and ask them for a meter that could understand somebody's intention, or the degree to which somebody has compassion in their heart, or the degree to which somebody is sincere, would we be able to find such a thing? Maybe on Amazon, I don't know. But probably not, right? No. Because it's not measurable through the tools that we use to observe material nature. So the ancients, those from the Vedic culture, considered that what is metaphysical is more important than even the physical, because there's a hierarchy. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes this hierarchy. He says, Indriyani paranyahur, indriyebhya param manaha, manasastu parabudha, yobude paratastu saha, which means that just observing our own bodies, lowest in the hierarchy is are the senses. Senses are made of matter, aren't they? And above the senses, according to the Bhagavad Gita, is the mind. The mind is also sense. It's called the sense within. It is the clearinghouse for all the sensual inputs we get from our worldly environment. But above the senses, manasastu parabhutir. Bhuti means intelligence. It's an instrument for distinguishing between one thing and another. And it's above the mind. After all, we have had the experience, our mind brings up something, and then the intelligence comes in and say, not so much. And above the mind is what is called the conscious being, or the Atma. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna distinguishes between two major energies. One is what he calls the lower energy, or separated energy. And he gives a catalog of earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. These are gross and subtle material elements. But then he says, apare metasthonyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayedam darete jagat. Above the gross and subtle material elements, there is another, wait for it, superior energy. Above matter, there's a superior energy. Above even the mind or intelligence, which are so fine compared to the grossest of matter, that oftentimes, and it says historically, in psychology, for instance, and just in general, people oftentimes think of the mind as something that's so subtle, or the intelligence so subtle, that maybe that's spiritual. But the Bhagavad Gita says, not yet. You haven't come to the spiritual substance. And even spiritual, the word can be misleading in some ways. When we say spirit, what do we mean by spirit? Some people call certain types of alcohol spirits. And sometimes we talk about spirits, we talk about, at least from my childhood, it was Casper the Friendly Ghost. Lucky he was friendly. But there's a way in which, in modern parlance, we can describe that beyond matter is consciousness. And this is the description of our source also. In Sanskrit, it's called Abhigna and Swarat. Abhigna means the supreme consciousness. So we have an individual consciousness. We're all conscious right now. I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, except for you weren't for a second. And now you are, and now you look confused. That means you're conscious. So we're conscious, and we can also observe that which is not conscious. We can look, for instance, at the elements of our body, and we can notice that we're separate from them, which means we're the observer, and the bodily elements are the observed. They're not observing me, I'm observing them. And this is the beginning of knowledge, says Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Kshetra jnam chapimam vidhi sarva kshetrishu bharata kshetra jnayor jnanam yattach jnanam matammama. He says one who can observe the difference between him or herself and the body sees the difference, that I'm conscious, the body's not conscious, I'm conscious of the body, it's not that I am my body. That person is on the threshold of knowledge. It's the foundational element of knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita. And so, what is consciousness, and what are the characteristics of consciousness as compared to matter? That's a great investigation. And that's what the great sages of India, who are recorded, dialogues are recorded in books like the Srimad Bhagavatam, had discussed. And in talking about them, there are many allegories which help us to realize the importance of making this distinction. Would you like to hear a story? I think I need a drone instrument. I can't tell a story without a drone. Is it possible? Sea drone? Thanks. Once there was a king named Suyaga. Suyaga means someone who is very expert at doing his duty. And as a king, he protected the citizens. He entered into a battle. He was a little above middle age. And maybe he had lost a step, who knows. But it was his last battle. Thank you. And Suyaga was such a valiant king that he had, on his demise, bitten his upper and lower lip very hard to show his prowess as he passed from this body. He was smeared with blood. Some of his limbs were broken from the battle. His weapons damaged from the severe fight. He had collapsed on the battlefield. And after the battlefield had cleared, the attendants of the king came and sat in a circle around him on the ground, who were then followed by the queens, his beloved consorts throughout his life. They moved into the inner circle and clutched his battle-worn clothes in their hands. And they looked up into the sky, which was turning to dusk, and they wailed. There was an anxiety amongst the attendants of the king because there was a time when the body, astrologically, should be taken from the battlefield and cremated before the next sun cycle, before darkness appeared. But the queens wouldn't let go of the body. And the more they thought about their plight, being left without their husband, the king Suyaga, the louder they wailed into the sky. Yamaraj, who is an empowered agent who helps to direct each soul's journey after leaving the human body, heard the wailing. He's a very powerful demigod, empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And to teach a lesson to the world, he came there to the battlefield from his planet called Yamaloka. But he didn't come as Yamaraj. Otherwise he may have startled the assembly. He came as a 5-year-old boy. And as he approached the dead king, surrounded by his queens and attendants, he looked curiously at them. And to calm them down, he said, "Well, why are you crying?" And blubbering. Above the tears, they said, "Our master, our husband, the king, is gone." And Yamaraj, in the form of a 5-year-old boy, said, "Gone? You must be mistaken. He's right there." They said, "No, you don't understand. He is gone." He said, "You don't understand. Same eyes, same ears, same hands, same mouth. He's right there." He said, "Little boy, he's gone." Yamaraj replied, "What you don't know is you never saw your husband. Throughout your whole life, you entertained him, you sat with him, you walked together, but you never saw him. The soul is subtle. It's beyond matter. It's beyond even the mind or the intelligence. It's categorically different from the body. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes the transmigration of the soul. Shariram yaravapnoti yachchap yukramatishvara grihitvaitani samyati vayur gandam ivashayat. So the consciousness is so subtle, he compares it to the wind. And when the wind moves, comes over some grass, if you're downwind, you'll smell fresh grass. The scent is there. If it goes over a garden of roses, you'll smell roses. It picks up the scent. So Krishna says, the soul is so subtle as it moves from one environment to another. The conscious soul picks up the mood of the environment, otherwise known as the modalities of nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas, and becomes infatuated with them. And they become part of his consciousness. In other words, his consciousness, which is originally pure, becomes covered. And then he says that this mixture of the material modes of nature with the consciousness of the living being is the cause of the living being's next body. And he says, Shotram chakshu sparshanam cha, rasanam granam evacha, adishtayam manaschayam, vishayan upasevate. And that is that every one of us right now has a customized set of senses with free undercoating thrown in. The senses are a filling in, says Patanjali Muni, of our desires from our last life. And then Krishna says, Ukramantam stitam vapi punjanam vagunan vitam vimudha nanupashyanti pashyanti jnanachakshasha. If one is trained in knowledge, as I've defined it from the Bhagavad Gita, to know the difference between oneself and one's body, one can understand what is taking place when utkramantam, which means when one steps out of this body. Ut means out, krama means step. So he says, Ukramantam stitam bhapi. He's situated, stitam, in a particular body, where we are right now. That's where we're sitting, right in the heart of this body. But when we step out of it, Ukramantam stitam bhapi, unless we're trained, unless the mind has been trained, unless we've practiced yoga throughout our life, we won't know what's happening. We know something's happening. We just don't know what it is. Bunjana gunanvitam. The person who's untrained doesn't know it. And Krishna goes on to emphasize how important it is to know this science. Yatanto yoginas chayanam pashyant yatman yavastitam. Yatanto pyakrita mano nayanam pashyanti chetasaha. He says, one whose eyes and whose mind is trained in knowledge can understand what's happening. Not only when he or she leaves the body, but when others leave the body, they can see what's happening. The soul's leaving. And leaving behind just material nature. The soul's unaffected. It never mixes with the body. It's like a dreamlike state. You may have a dream that you're late for your flight at the airport and you can't find your ticket. Have you ever had that dream? The one I have almost every night? And I wake up and I say, oh, no flight today. Or even if it is, I do have my ticket because it's an e-ticket. Didn't have to find it somewhere. And all our interactions with the world are based on a misunderstanding that I'm this body, I'm part of this world. So Krishna says, yatanto yoginaschainam pashyan yatmanyavastitam. If you become trained in this spiritual knowledge, then you'll interact with the world in an enlightened way and not become more and more entangled. What is the entanglement of the world? It's spoken of by one of Krishna's very straightforward avatar teachers, meaning Krishna comes in many different forms to teach spiritual knowledge, and one of them was Vrishabhadeva. And Vrishabhadeva had 100 sons. You'll be interested to know one of them was Bharat. Does that sound familiar? That's what India is named after. One of the sons of Vrishabhadeva. He had 100 sons. 9 others were the Navayogendras. Does that sound familiar? It better if you're studying the verse from the 11th canto right now. There's Kavi, Havi, Antariksha, Prabhupada, Pipalayana, Avarhotra, Sri Antariksha. Where's Sri Antariksha? Is he in here? Prabhupada, Pipalayana, or Karvajana, the Navayogendras. They were 9 others. And many other sons, that leaves another 90. He gave them instructions. He gathered them all together. If you have 100 sons, you got to gather them all together and give them instructions. And one of the instructions he gave them was Nunam pramatak kurute vikarma yad indriya pritaya aprinoti nasada manye yata atmanoyam asan apikleshada asadeha. And it means that when we interact with the world in an inappropriate way, the mind becomes mad, pramata. Yet indriya pritaya, and what's the symptom of that is that we develop a priti, or a love, for the object of the senses. Nasadu manye yata atmanoyam. He said, this is not very good. Asan kleshada asadeha, because once we're locked into a love for the senses for the objects, then he says we're trapped here in the material world. And we suffer klesha. And he goes on to say in the next verse, Parabhavas tavada bodhajato yavanda jignasada atmatatvan yavat kriyas tavadi dhammanovai karmatmakam yena sharira bandhaha. He describes how our pure consciousness, which is full of bliss and knowledge, becomes tinged by our contact with the material world. That's called karmatmaka, colored by the lower energy of the material world. And it corrupts our senses. And the experience that we have in the world seems like it should work well, but it never does, says Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga, etc. An example that Prabhupada used to give is that if you have your favorite pudding, which is what? Do you like pudding? Who doesn't like pudding? Sweet rice. Do you like sweet rice? Or do you like some other thing better? Go ahead, name it. Huh? Brownies? Okay, you can have your brownies. We'll give you the brownies, your pudding, or your sweet rice. But we just add a little bit of sand. And crunchity crunch. This is karmatmaka. When the consciousness becomes colored by connection to the modes of material nature, that becomes corrupted, colored. We can't find that satisfaction we're looking for. So the answer isn't, says Vrishabhadeva, to try to adjust oneself in this world. It's not that you didn't yet find the perfect place to live, because there is no perfect place to live. Krishna makes that clear in the Bhagavad Gita when he says, from the topmost planet, Brahmaloka, down to the lowest, there's no perfect place to live in this world, because it all has the same anomaly. It's not your home. So what to do about this? Some philosophers say, just ignore the senses. Try to militantly control them so you don't touch the world. But what happens then is the heart becomes hard and angry. And then one drowns in tiny puddles of anger. One becomes dominated by the emotions within the heart. And other people try to say the world's an illusion. And once we realize there is no world and there is no us, we're anatmaka, which means anatma, means there's no soul. It's just an illusion that you're a soul. Try telling that to someone who just lost their beloved grandmother, that she never existed. It doesn't make sense. But bhakti, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, the soul's not really part of this world, but there is a world that we are part of. And we're not far away from it. In the Sri Upanishad, Manu says, Tarejati tanaijati tadure tadvantike. The Supreme is far away, but very near as well. And for those who know the process of bhakti, then the Supreme is in the palm of one's hand. How is that? One can contact the spiritual world and the origin of the material and spiritual worlds, Krishna, through the process of bhakti yoga. It begins with the chanting of the divine mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. So here we follow the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, which show us how to interact with the world in an enlightened way. But more than that, how to realign ourselves with our highest interest in life, which is to be constantly in contact with our original source, who, by the way, Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, is our best friend and well-wisher. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who recently appeared in the world to teach these very same teachings to the public, and who encouraged everyone, especially in India, to take up this task of going door to door in Silicon Valley, or Cupertino, or San Jose. Where do you live? San Ramon. Where else? Fremont. Let's hear it for Fremont. Brentwood. Anyone who raised their hand and said where they're from volunteered to go door to door there. But we'll go with you next week to give people an opportunity to take a Bhagavad Gita, read it, and chant Hare Krishna. So that's what we do here at ISKCON of Silicon Valley. And we can test out the system that's been passed down to us. It's not complicated. It's an immediate process for contacting the spiritual world and coming in contact with Krishna. Would you like to try it out? Yes. Okay. So all you have to do is put your hands high in the air when I say 3 and say Krishna, and call out to Krishna. You're here in Silicon Valley. Of course, he's in your heart. You could say he's also in the spiritual world, but you got to call out loud enough so he can hear you in the topmost planet of the spiritual world, because there's a lot of planets above us right now. We're in the middle of the universe. Goloka namni nijadamni taleta tasya devi mahesha haridama suteshu teshu te te prabhava nichaya vitaschayena govindamadi purusham. Above us, above Devidam, you know we're in Devidam? You thought you were in Mountain View? Above the material universe known as Devidam is Maheshdam. So we want to say Krishna loud enough so the Mahesh, who is a devotee of Krishna, can also hear us. But what's above Mahesh Dham? Haridham, that's Vaikuntha. Lord Narayan's there. Most people are chanting the Purush Sukta there. But we want to say Krishna so loud they can hear us as they're chanting Purush Sukta and Vishnu Sahasranam. And what's above Haridham? Golokadam. Golokanamni Nijadamni today. It's Krishna's personal abode. So it's not necessarily the volume, it's the sincerity of the way you cry out. And this is the teaching of Bhakti, is that if you're very sincere to connect with God and you call out His names, then you're directly in contact with Him. You're already directly in contact with Him, but the consciousness has become covered. It can become uncovered by the sincere process of calling out. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. So, if you're at work tomorrow, sorry to bring it up, and you feel anxiety of any kind, that my hair doesn't look right, or why did I buy the mauve color? I should have got red, like they told me. If you feel that you've been disrespected, what happened? And you're feeling the anxiety. Or if you're at school, nobody's at school now, I hope. But if you are, and you're in your seat, and you feel anxiety over the next test coming up, just do this. 1, 2, 3. Krishna! And then you won't have to worry about going to your job anymore. And now we'll try the chanting as was delivered to us by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Sri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Shunyavani Paschata Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara I'm dedicating this kirtan and also the evening artik and the string of prayers tonight to a very, very dear godbrother of ours who we just heard from his wife just this morning, early this morning, that he had passed just after midnight on Friday night. And we don't know the exact circumstances, except that he's left his body. He had a lifetime of service. He was one of Prabhupada's personal servants for some years, a secretary, and we were very close to him. He lived way up north, Northern California, up down near Mount Shasta. His name was Paramahamsa, and it was very sad for us because we've always kept in touch over the years and had a very deep friendship. And it's funny because I gave a class on Friday and I saw that he had put a like on the class, and I thought, oh, there he is. And then just a few hours later, his wife informed us that he was gone. So reminded Nirkula and me about how important time is. There's no time for scrolling. There's no time to waste. At any moment, we can have the last tick, and then we're off. And the science of Bhagavad Gita teaches us. Be ready for that. Yeah, please move forward by 7.2 inches. And if you'd like to have a bigger space to worship in, then afterwards, bring me a big sack of money. And we'll go pick one up for you. Hare Krishna. Some practical points, because the first part of our discussion, or monologue, was philosophical. And what can one do when confronted with the urges of the senses? Because in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions, as I said before, that when we're able to control the mind, control the senses, the mind becomes one's friend. And what's more, the senses, especially the tongue, if you've ever taken time to observe your tongue, have you? Yes. When's the last time? I don't believe you. Unless you're a kid, you'd look in the mirror. But if you do, you might look and see it looks like a rudder. And one of the ways in which we ply smoothly or direct ourselves in the water is by having a rudder in a boat. And the senses can, when they're unruly, take us, as Krishna says, off course. And he gives this metaphor that when a boat is blown on the water, it doesn't have any moorings, then moorings, and it gets blown here, there, and everywhere. And similarly, our minds become restless. And there's no peace. So how to control the mind and senses? Well, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasa dehina rasavarjam rasopyasya param jishva nivartate. That we may restrain our senses, but then still have a sense of longing for the sense objects. That's possible, right? The last time you fasted was today for Ekadashi, and you might fast, and then you might be thinking about eating, drinking, depends what kind of fasting you're doing. But then he says there's a state of consciousness in which you're already drinking something better spiritually. In fact, that's mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the story that opens King Parikshit gets cursed to die in 7 days. When's that last time that happened to you? And he had to figure out what to do in his last 7 days, and then he met the sage Shukadev, who told him to get ready to remember God at the time of death. And to help him remember God at the time of death, Shukadev Goswami spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam, which starts off with the narration of what happened at Naimisharanya, the forest. That's the first chapter. Sages gathering at Naimisharanya forest and discussing how to do the greatest good to the world. And we have nested stories, stories within stories. And the story of King Parikshit leaving his kingdom, even as a young person with so much power. And of course, he knew he had 7 days, and sitting down on the Ganga, meeting Shukadev Goswami, who was a great sage who had been so unwilling to engage with the material world that he wouldn't come out of the womb of his mother. And finally did after 16 years. Came out as ready for junior high? Middle school? High school. Well, if you're some of these kids, you already graduated from college, but anyway. He came out and then he left home. He went to the forest, didn't want to have any interaction with the world, and then he came back after he heard some of the verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. And there we find the story of King Parikshit. And King Parikshit didn't want to waste any time, so he fasted. Since I've said fasted twice, don't get the wrong idea. We don't fast a lot here. Well, we do, but we feast afterwards. Anyway, it's a long story. And he says to Shukadeva Goswami, Naishati dushaha shunmam takdodam apipadate. Pibantam tvam mukamboja chutam harikatamritam. Chutam means falling. And harikatamritam means that the words Shukadeva is speaking, they're amrita. What's the best drink you've ever had? Sweet rice again? Okay. Some ambrosia, if you've ever had ambrosia. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is described as an intoxicating beverage. Pibantam. That it's the most relishable beverage, and it's semi-solid, so you can drink it. And spiritually intoxicated, so when people drink it, then they pass out, and then get back up again, they drink some more. It sounds like the thing in the material world, but it's not. It's spiritual. So as Shukadeva Goswami was speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj said, Naishati dushaha shunman taktodam apadite, that usually if somebody's not drinking water and they're not eating, they're really hungry. And they're thinking about when's going to be the break fast, right? But speaking of drinking water, he said, I'm not even thirsty. And even to add to that, the trifecta, he didn't even sleep. And he said, I'm not tired. And why is it? Because chutam harikatamritam. It's like a waterfall of the best beverage I've ever taken. It's falling from your mouth in the form of the words that you're speaking. So this is what Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita as the ultimate form of being in the world but not being affected by it. When you have that beverage to drink, that becomes your preoccupation. It's what everyone's looking for in the world, but they don't find it. Here's a musician who was popular in the 1980s here in America, maybe around the world. He sold a lot of records, and one of his songs was, I Need a New Drug. Because people in general like drugs. Even ants like it. They find a grain of sugar, or if they get information, a grain of sugar is on the top of a skyscraper building. What's the biggest building in San Francisco? Salesforce. If they find that if the ant's on the street, what street goes by Salesforce? Huh? You guys work there and you don't even know where you... They find some Mission Street. The ant on Mission Street finds out there's a grain of sugar on the top of the Salesforce building. He's going there to find it. Everyone wants some intoxication, but the best of intoxication comes from this spiritual sound vibration. It becomes so relishable. And so he says, I'm not thirsty, I'm not hungry, I'm not even tired because I'm drinking this. And Krishna says, normally people, they renounce something in the world and then they think about it all the time and they can't wait to get it back. There's a rebound effect, sort of an addiction to the world. And then he said, but when one gets a higher taste, then one is no longer interested in the paltry things of this world. They seem distasteful, and we're not interested. In the meantime, it's very helpful to have some ways to continue one's practice of devotional service. Some people have complained, in fact, quite a few people have complained, that they're distracted by one specific device. Can you think what it might be? Yeah, it's shocking, because any public place you go to, you might notice that everyone's got a phone. In fact, I see a lot of dog walkers. Any dog walkers out there? They're walking their dog and they look at the phone. They can't put it down. And when we were in the airport in somewhere, Delhi or not Delhi, we were crossing over somewhere from one place to another, and we had to sit in the lounge for a while. And there was a man with a baby, and it was late at night. He was trying to take care of the baby. It was a little cranky. So finally, the only thing that satisfied the baby was he put her over his shoulder and gave the baby the cell phone. And then she was quiet. And he couldn't see her, but he was walking around and the baby was hanging off the back of the father and like looking at the screen. So there's a technique to temporarily stay bad habits so that one can pick up momentum with one's good habits. And the good habits, especially good habit, is to learn how to chant and hear. Shravanam Kirtanam. And the more one does it, the more practice one gets at it, the more one can taste the sweetness of it. It starts to be appealing and one can get a higher taste. So how does one give up the addiction of the lower attractions for the higher ones? Would you like to know a technique? Yes. Well, there's an old saying, and it came from, I looked it up, William Gladstone. From the 1600s, he said that justice delayed is justice denied. Have you ever heard that? Any law students in here? Or anybody who watches the news? Justice delayed is justice denied. Means when you don't mete out justice when it's due and you delay it, then generally it never happens. So in the same way, you can apply this to the itches of the senses by saying, sense gratification delayed is sense gratification denied. And this comes up in the pastime of Haridāsa Ṭhākura, who was visited by somebody in the middle of the night who wanted to interrupt his chanting. And he told that person, fine, but wait, later. He didn't say no, he just said, just sit down, and later we'll talk about it. And later never came. In fact, that person became a devotee and didn't want to distract him anymore, minus all the details. So rather than saying absolutely no, never again, and then bouncing back into the same thing one was doing before, one can apply this principle of neglect. Prabhupada mentions it in a purport. We could call it tender, loving neglect. TLN, not TLC. So when those distractions come into one's mind, the urges to do something foolish that becomes entangling, then one can say, later, delay. Does anybody here know how to procrastinate? Well, there's a university major you can take. It's called applied procrastination. And you can learn it from the Bhagavad Gita and from this lesson today is that when the inferior objects present themselves, if you have the power to procrastinate at that point, that's a good thing. And say, fine, I acknowledge you, but I can't engage with you right now, later. And just keep putting it off. You know how to do that, right? I'm expert at it. So you just have to find the right thing to neglect and keep neglecting it while you steal time to do your bhajan and keep doing it. Because there will come a point when the scales will tip in favor of the transcendental sound. Then you move to the safe side in devotional service. And one of the other very helpful ways in which to stay steady in the practice of Bhakti Yoga is to have friends who are steady in practicing Bhakti Yoga. Anybody have any friends out there? A lot of friends, okay. So it's always good to make new friends. So let's try right now for a moment. We'll just take 5 minutes. And everyone can stand up. Be careful where you walk. But meet somebody here in the room that you've never met before. Introduce yourself. And tell them why you came here today. You got 2.5 minutes each. Are you ready? We do have our cameras on, and we have monitors in the back to see if you're talking to one of your friends. We have face recognition, and AI is running. So it better be good. 1, 2, 3, meet somebody new. Somebody new. Did you meet anybody new? Did they tell you why they came here? Can we get a couple of reports? Okay. Was it fun? Have fun and nothing but fun. Okay.
Hare Krishna. Today I met Sangeeta, and she is first time coming to ISV.
Oh, welcome.
Couple days back, one devotee named Deepa, she met her in coffee shop, and then they were talking each other, and she explained, she told that her father name is Krishna, and her father is a lifetime member of ISKCON, but he never came to ISKCON, and that Deepa Mataji told about our temple, and she told about our discourse of lecture and the musical instruments and the kirtan, especially she praised a lot. She's very curious what is it, and she wants to come and see today, and she liked it very much. She's saying she wants to come again and again, she told.
You're our kind of person. Welcome. All right. Who else met somebody who's first time you've met? Yes, okay.
So Anushka came with her mother, and it's her first time. And
Second time.
Second time.
Third time.
Oh, okay. So she said she hasn't been coming because she lives in Cupertino, but she doesn't have friends. She would like to come if she has more friends. So here's Anushka from Cupertino. Hare Krishna.
It's so important to have friends. It's one of the teachings of our top acharya, Rupa Goswami, in the Upadeshamrita. He says, Dadati pratigurnati, guyamakyati prichiti, bhunte bhojayate chaiva, shadvidam pratilakshanam. That one of the mainstays of the practice of Bhakti Yoga is to have loving relationships with other devotees. And he names the 6. He says, giving gifts, accepting gifts, revealing one's mind, and also hearing the other person reveal his or her mind, and also giving prasad and accepting prasad. Just recently, we've had the opportunity, because summertime and we're here, to go and visit friends and just sit and talk and have prasadam. And I have to say, it's been the most pleasant and edifying experience of all. If we had our way, that's all we do all day, every day. One more. Who'd you meet? Why'd they come? Uh-oh, everyone met somebody they already knew? Okay, Risheshwari Leela.
So I met Rosaline, and I've met her many times before. I didn't know much about her. So I was curious to go a little bit deeper and understand and connect. And I was very happy to find how she found her way. Actually, she came to the temple looking for a Srimad Bhagavatam. And I was very grateful that she shared how she had already she had a Bhagavad Gita, but it was not an as it is. But someone told her that, she was actually looking online and she found that she has to go to a temple. So she thought, instead of getting a book from Amazon, I should go to a temple and pay the temple, not Amazon. So that's what brought her here.
Right here, is this temple?
Yes.
Did you get your book? Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you. And that's another thing. We may be in community, we may be around devotees, and because we say Hari Bol when we're passing in the hall, we may think we know what's going on with them or why they came here, but it's very helpful to get to know devotees, become friends, invite them over to your house, have prasadam or give prasadam, accept prasadam, give gifts. And Samdir Prabhu, are you here? I saw him yesterday. He's here? He's not in the room right now. He just got back from India yesterday, I think. And added to that, he got married when he's in India. And he came back with his new wife. I mean, not new wife. He didn't have a wife. They're newly married. Okay, so a couple of months ago, I had mentioned that I was on United Airlines, and they had given us some cards to fill out to say how much, if we did, appreciate the service of somebody on the airplane. And so I had suggested we do the same thing here at ISV. When you see somebody doing something nice, some service, extending him or herself, then you could get one of these little cards. It says, and then the reason I brought up Samdir Prabhu is because I said, does anybody here, can you help me? And he immediately raised his hand. And so we've been working on these for a little while, and when he went to India, he had the first batch made so we can test them out. And on one side, it says, can you read it? Thank you for your exemplary service. And on the back, it says, Hare Krishna, in a place where you can put their name. Your hard work has not gone unnoticed. Thank you for being, and then you can check the boxes, kind-hearted, extra efficient, dependable, helpful. I especially appreciate, and then you can write in. And if you want, you can put your name at the bottom. It says from such and such, or it can be anonymous if you want, depends. So we have a few of these cards, if anybody'd like to test them out. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We only have a few. So you can pull these apart and give one to each one of those who have raised their hands first. And then try it out today. Try to catch somebody doing something right. Or if you've already seen their enthusiasm, you can just, and you always thought, I wanted to say something nice to them and appreciate them, encourage them, but I never got the chance. Well, now you got a chance. And there's more where these came from. This is a test run to see if a riot breaks out or something after this, and people start fighting, then we won't use it anymore.